Welcome to another SGC webinar series. This session is brought to you by SEGI Group of Colleges. My name is Neva. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Welcome to this live webinar titled Fostering Wellbeing in the Face of COVID-19, brought to you by SEGI Group of Colleges. Now, before we begin, sorry for the technical delay a little bit. Before we begin, I'd like to do a quick check. I hope everyone can hear and see me clearly. If you can, please type yes in the comment box. Great, looks like everyone can hear and see. That's great. So for those of you who are just joining in right now, I'd like to welcome you once again to this live webinar titled Fostering Wellbeing in the Face of COVID-19, given that situation that we're facing at this point of time. My name is Teva, and I will be your host for today. A quick briefing to everyone that is joining here today. The session is about 60 minutes. So during this session, we encourage you to type your questions in the comment section below, and our speaker will try to answer them after her sharing session. We would also like to inform everyone that this webinar is recorded and will be used by SEGI University and colleges and its subsidiaries in the future. Before we proceed, can everyone type in the comments section and share with us where you are connecting from? Because we've heard that there are other participants from all over the country, from other countries and also from Malaysia. So are you ready to start this webinar already? If you're ready, press 1. If you're ready, press 1, just in the comment section. Okay, great. I'm going to introduce you guys today's speaker, Dr. Giselle Diaz. She's from our partner university, University of Greenwich, which is a program that we run in SEGI College Subang Jaya, the psychology BSc program. She's a lecturer in psychology as well with the University of Greenwich, and has a background in neuroscience and past experience as cognitive behavioral therapist where she was in Brazil. So without further ado, I will pass over to Dr. Giselle. Let's welcome our speaker, Dr. Giselle Diaz. Over to you, Dr. Giselle.
Hello, Teva. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me well? Yeah, can you see me okay? And can you hear me well too? Okay. Thank you very much, Teva, for the lovely introduction. I would like to thank you for the opportunity of giving this webinar. It's such a pleasure for me to be talking to you and seeing so many amazing people, attendees from this lovely area in the world. So a lovely good evening to you. I believe it's evening for you guys. Right, so let's start with our presentation today. And that is, yes, fostering well-being in the face of COVID-19, tackling loneliness and developing resilience through positive psychology and solution-focused skills. So as David said, well, it's been a very, very challenging time that we all face in the world with the pandemic. And there is just so much that is out of our control in this current situation. And I think the idea of this presentation today is that we've put together and brought to you some things that are within our control that we could be doing to enhance our well-being, even though we are going through such a difficult moment in our families and our communities and all of that. So, of course, it's still very early days to know if the tools and the techniques that we are going to discuss today are applicable to the COVID-19 crisis, so to the type of uncertainty and anxiety that we are feeling, because all that's going on is somewhat unprecedented. You know, the things around the lockdown and not being able to go out, go to work, see our families, see our friends, and everything. But it's all evidence based on pre-COVID-19 studies, and a good amount of what I'm bringing to you today is part of a student well-being program that I co-developed at King's College London with Dr. Patricia Zenzeng, and well, we had very good feedback, and we've been having very good feedback on that. So I really hope it's going to be useful for you and interesting, and that's going to spark your curiosity about the field of positive psychology, and above all, that you feel encouraged and inspired to give it a go to some of these techniques that we're going to discuss. Some of them will be familiar to you. These are things that maybe you will have heard about from previous readings, from previous webinars, from previous YouTube videos and presentations that you may have been in touch with, and some of it might be new. So let's see how it goes. But thank you so much for coming. So I'm just trying to move myself to the next slide. Let's see here if that is going to work. Yes. So I don't know why my next slide is not. It is not showing. Just a moment. There. Can you all see now? Great. So before I go on, I just wanted to briefly expand on what Teva has very nicely brought in about my connection with Segi College. So we have this collaboration. I'm a lecturer at the University of Greenwich. I am originally from Brazil, but I live in London in the UK, and I work at the University of Greenwich. And there we offer a BSc Honours Psychology course, and that is the picture of our campus. It's a lovely campus, a lovely place to go. I hope you all can come and visit us at some point, and who knows, even study with us. But right now we are all working from home, as you may imagine. The other thing is that we I'm thinking I'm having some trouble with my buttons here. Okay, yes, there we go. So we have a collaboration with Segi Subhanjaya, where we also offer the BSc Honours Psychology degree there with Segi, and a lot of what we're going to discuss today is part of the content of one of the modules that we have at our course, in the Applied Positive Psychology module, and also anyway, I just wanted to invite you to know a little bit more about the partnership and about this very interesting field. We also want to start bringing to students at Segi, especially Segi Psychology, the student well-being program I told you about, and a lot of what we're going to cover today is part of that. So I hope you'll like it and you'll be interested in getting to know a bit more about it. So before we can really start, I just wanted to know from you, how have you been feeling since the COVID-19 crisis started? And what have you done that you found helpful for your well-being and that you would like to share with the group, that you think people would get inspired by what you've been doing that worked for you and that you think could be a good thing to do as well? Would anybody want to say a word or two about, anything that maybe you're doing, maybe you're I don't know. For example, I'll tell a bit about myself. I found out that I really enjoy doing painting, and that's something that I found out I can do with my 4-year-old son, and he enjoys as well. So we have been seeing here. Some people are doing yoga at home, meditation. Uh, some people have been using the time for self-development. So yes, trying to, to, to to stir our focus from the negatives to, okay, so what can I do with this time that I'm given to be at home? Yes, learn new skills. Yes, it's a little bit like me. I'm trying to learn some new skills as well. Zumba and cooking. That's really lovely. Yes, reading and yoga and all of that. So it's good. It's very interesting that many of you are mentioning mindful. Well, not exactly mindfulness meditation, but meditation and yoga. So contemplative practices in general, and they are really good from a psychological and a neuroscientific point of view. These strategies. Have been demonstrated to be really good in calming us down and slowing down the pathways that tend to be associated with a greater amount of stress. So that's really lovely to see that you're in this pathway towards an enhanced well-being. So let's see if what we're going to discuss today could be integrated with the things that you're doing already that you think are working for you to boost your well-being even more. So let me get back to I don't have a very big screen, so always a bit tricky to get back to the presentation. So yes, there are three main topics we're going to be discussing today. One is loneliness and social isolation. So all of a sudden, we are at home. I know some cities, some countries are starting to ease that down a bit, and then of course there is the uncertainty and the anxiety that arises from that. And even the countries that are still in lockdown, as is the case for us here, at some point we need to start getting ready for a life post lockdown. So many people have been struggling with loneliness and social isolation. So what are these things and what could be done? The other thing is acknowledging our emotions. In situations like the one we are facing, it is just very, 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 very easy. It is part of our lived experience to feel that we are experiencing strong emotions, and it's very, very, very common as well that we feel that we feel guilty about some things. We feel maybe a bit impatient with our family and people around us, and even friends, or we feel a bit snappy, or we feel a bit unhappy and all of that. And it's important that we acknowledge these emotions and understand that they are extremely normal, that it is absolutely fine to feel frustrated and don't feel guilty about it. It is about how we can do to constructively deal with these emotions and do things to move forward for our own well-being and that of the people around us that really matters. We don't choose how we feel, but we can choose what we do so that that can have not have a very strong negative impact on ourselves and those around us. And the other thing is that we're going to discuss some solution-focused steps for well-being. So things around understanding our strengths and understanding our values and setting up goals and action plans. So let's get ready for a life post-lockdown, or even within the lockdown. I think these strategies will help us to as you said, get organized and get plans to learn new skills, to work on our personal and professional development. so focused on what we can do constructively with this time and this circumstance, even though there's so much that is outside our control, and there is just uh, uh, so much tragedy and all that's going on. So let's move on. Um, I've told you in the title that, it was about positive psychology. It is about positive psychology today, and about a framework in psychology that we call the solution-focused framework. But yes, positive psychology will be one of our overarching framework to well-being today. And of course, I would love to cover a lot on the evidence underpinning positive psychology models, but we won't have the time for that. However, I just wanted you to know, well, it might be familiar to some of you, but positive psychology is a subfield within the psychological sciences that is concerned about understanding the factors that drive people to flourish rather than language. So what are the things, what are the pillars to a life that is a life full of meaning and full of zest? There are different models, as you can imagine, but one of them that I really like is one of the first most central frameworks in positive psychology that will try to help us understand well-being, and that's called the PERMA model, and that was proposed by Professor Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, and he's considered the father, the founder of the modern science of positive psychology. And according to him and his model, there are some key components to well-being and flourishing, and these are positive emotions, so emotions like joy, love, awe, amusement, inspiration, serenity. Engagement, so being engaged, being involved with activities that creates a sense of flow, which is when you feel so absorbed by something, that activity is so meaningful and pleasant for you. So it's not just about being pleasant or not just about being meaningful, but about a combination of these two aspects that you feel that time flew by, and when you realize, oh my God, the day has gone, and I was still here doing this, gardening or writing or painting or doing anything, or being with family and everything. The other pillar to well-being would be constructive relationships. So positive relationships, feeling connected with people in a meaningful way, being supported by people and supporting people as well, and having that very constructive relationship with people being another very important component to well-being. The other one is meaning, and has become a really central aspect to well-being as it's seen nowadays by positive psychologists. So it's not so much about being happy in a way of, let's say, as eating chocolate gives us, happiness, or going on holiday. It's not so much that, but it is a more enduring way of living, a more enduring state of mind where you're living in alignment with things that give you purpose. So you feel what you do is part of a greater good for society. And the other one is accomplishment. It's that feeling of pride that we take from doing things, that even small things in our everyday life, that we feel that have contributed to our community, and where we feel a sense of competence and everything. So basically, techniques and tools and strategies, the things that you've been saying in the chat here, if they are able to draw on to contribute to these pillars, then very likely you will experience an enhanced sense of well-being. So that is what the idea is here. And the first thing that we're going to discuss today is relationships, because of the issue of loneliness that we've discussed. So we'll be drawing on that particular pillar now. Before we go on, then what is loneliness? And for a long time, loneliness uh, used to be understood as a synonym for social isolation. So you feel lonely when you have a small social network, when you have few friends, for example. And nowadays, we know that that is not what loneliness is about. You could have one friend or live on your own and have a connection with one member of your family and don't feel lonely at all, because it is about the quality of those relationships and not about the quantity or the size of your social network. So it is about our subjective experience of loneliness. It is how we perceive social isolation. If we perceive ourselves as isolated, then very likely we will experience this aversive feeling of loneliness. Um, so it has a lot to do with our feelings and our thoughts about the adequacy and the quality of our relationships. And it's also about an inability to overcome these feelings of loneliness after a life transition. So it is very common that we experience loneliness during life transitions. For example, you start at university, you move to a new town, you get a new job. These life transitions mean that you're going to basically start from scratch in terms of your social relationships with those new groups. And it is extremely common that you feel lonely during the first months of that transition. But then we learn to overcome that. We connect with people, and then we start developing a sense of belonging to these new groups. When we are unable to experience that feeling, then very likely we will feel lonely and will experience loneliness. And the danger with that, with experiencing loneliness, is that there's a wealth of research showing that loneliness has been associated with a number of negative outcomes for our health and our mental health. For example, chronic loneliness, so loneliness, experiencing this aversive feeling of being on your own, of feeling that you're not good enough for a group, or for to be part of a group or to connect with people, for more than 3 years, have been associated with shorter lifespans, with an increased risk for depression and for suicidal ideation, and an increased risk for heart disease and infections. So I think it becomes very clear how serious all this conversation is, and how important it is for us to start noticing and becoming aware of whether we are experiencing loneliness and seeing what we can do about it, and also of the people around us. You know, if you spot a friend, a colleague, a member of your family you feel are struggling with loneliness, what are the things that you could do so that we could support our communities and our groups in ways that protect them from these very serious and aversive outcomes of loneliness. So another interesting point is that social isolation increases the risk of death in ways that are equivalent to smoking cigarettes, and physical inactivity or obesity, which are extremely are factors that are risk factors that are well known as being quite detrimental to our health and mental health. And despite all this, loneliness is often stigmatized, trivialized, or ignored. People don't give the attention that it deserves. So I thought, well, maybe it is a good opportunity for us to be discussing today a little bit about loneliness, in terms of let's become aware of it, aware of the negative outcomes, and see what can be done. So the good news is that loneliness is not an immutable trait. Of course, some of us will tend to feel more lonely, and loneliness as a biological construct is something that is present in all of us, but it's not immutable. There are things that can be done. so that we feel a bit more comfortable in establishing new bonds and developing this sense of belonging to groups and to our families and all of that. So some strategies that in the literature have been shown to really help with loneliness is, us working to improve our social skills, activities that enhance social support, so doing things in group that rather than on your own, creating opportunities for social contact, which obviously a lot of it is very difficult to be doing as we are at the moment in many countries. But the idea here is for us to become aware of these things and think creatively. What can we do, even though we are in a social distancing, be it in the form of lockdown, be it in the form of social distancing, even though going into work and everything, what can we do creatively to still support one another socially? And one very important aspect or one very important and effective, perhaps the most effective strategy to tackle loneliness is addressing what we call maladaptive social cognition. And what is that? Well, it's about thoughts around our own desirability as part of a group. And when I say a group, it could be just like two people, you connecting with another person. And it is also well established in the literature that lonely individuals approach social encounters with greater cynicism and mistrust. So these cognitions will be like barriers to wanting to connect with people. If we feel lonely, we rate others and ourselves more negatively, and we tend to have lower feelings of self-worth, and we blame ourselves for social failure. So the idea here about these interventions addressing these ways of thinking is to try and change the way we feel by changing the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about being part of a group that is meaningful to us. So it will emphasize elements, these strategies will emphasize elements such as the identification of automatic thoughts, so things that go in our mind without our conscious awareness. So I'm not good enough to be part of this group, or this group is not really interesting to me, no one will like me, and all of that. So identify these things that may pop up in our minds, and regard them as hypotheses, that is, as something that could be, but they need testing before I can really take them as a fact. So kind of questioning, doubting these unhelpful beliefs and saying, well, is it really true that I am not good enough to be part of this group? What have I done so far? And also understand that sometimes, yes, it will be challenging. Some people might not like something we said, or might not agree with all that we consider and we think about, but does that mean that I then need to withdraw and not be in touch anymore? Or is it more about developing some flexibility to learn from other people's perspectives and in a friendly and constructive way? So this is what these interventions will be about. So if you are familiar to psychology, you may have recognized already that interventions that aim to change the way we think, to change the way we feel, are really aligned with a model called the cognitive behavioral model. And that is a very evidence-based, well-established model in mental health, psychiatry, and psychology. So the main the core element of cognitive behavioral model is that it is not the events that trigger our emotional reactions and our behaviors, but it is how we think about them. It is the meanings that we attributes to them. So, for example, I'm giving this presentation, and I have people from all over the world listening to me, and I feel extremely honored with this opportunity, and really want this to be something that is pleasant and constructive to everyone. But it might be that some people might not like it, or that I feel very exposed. So let's pretend that, before we started the presentation, I was feeling extremely anxious. And then if I went on my mind and thought, okay, is it giving the presentation in itself that's making me anxious? And then I would very likely note that no, it's because the presentation in itself can be interpreted in many different ways. I can see it as an opportunity to establish a dialogue with lovely, amazing people interested in this field, or I can see it as a threat to my psychological well-being, with people perhaps not liking it and writing and saying that this is not good and all of that. So you see, it is not the event in itself that will trigger the emotion. So it is about this mediation. According with the model, it is about the meaning that I give to it that is going to trigger that anxiety or not. So according with that, with the model, then what should I do in that situation? So the first step would be to identify the activating events. So, for example, it could be giving the presentation, or with the easing of lockdown, it could be, well, going into work again. Identifying beliefs and thoughts. So, what is going in my mind that I can feel it's making me very tense and anxious when I consider this situation of going back into work? And then there are various things. It could be thoughts around getting contaminated as I commute. It could be, well, after so many weeks at home, I've put on weight. How will my colleagues see that? Will I receive a lot of criticism from people? How will that hurt me in a way? Or it could be, will I still feel I belong to this group? And so there are just so many. These are just some examples. Some of them might resonate with you. Some of them you might even feel a bit silly, but it's just some examples of things that could go in our minds, triggered by one common situation. And then, of course, these thoughts will be related with emotional consequences. So there will be feelings associated with it. I might actually think in my mind, okay, going back to work, and then I could think, I'll see my friends again, I'll see my colleagues again, I'll see my students again. We'll be able to sit and have a coffee potentially. Well, maybe that's in a long future, but that perspective would then be associated with excitement. So not so much anxiety, but another emotion, in this case, a more positive emotion. Right, and then what do I do after I have identified these events and beliefs and everything? So the idea, according with the cognitive behavioral model, would be to change the unhelpful beliefs. In the case of loneliness, if my thoughts are around my desirability as a friend, as a social companion, so if I think I'm not worth it, I never say, I'm inappropriate, I never say something that is seen as clever or interesting or funny by my colleagues, then it is about reframing these things. So what are other helpful ways? Does it happen all the time, or how could I create new opportunities to change those beliefs? So one step would be to really put this into perspective and think, well, maybe, yes, there was that day that someone really didn't like what I said, but there were other days where I said something and everybody had a laugh, and that was really pleasant. And it doesn't have to be pleasant all the time. People have the right to disagree with me, and that's okay too. And that is part of growth and personal growth. And actually, by disagreeing with me, someone is giving me the opportunity to see things from a different perspective. So it is the interventions that work around loneliness are really around this idea of becoming aware of thoughts that could trigger this behavioral avoidance. So not wanting to be connecting, creating bonds with people, to changing these beliefs to more realistic, more evidence-based beliefs. And of course, more helpful beliefs as well. So devising action plans, and we're going to talk a little bit about action plans later in the presentation. So, okay, so now what do I do with it? Well, how can I do it? Should I call someone? Should I arrange a call in, any sort of online platform to see how people are doing and see how we could connect and exchange ideas? And then exercising these new beliefs and putting this action plan into practice. So again, it is a lot about practice. It's creating new habits. It is making automatic something that in the beginning might sound a little bit different to us, because these are not ways we are used to thinking. We're unfortunately many times we're used to rating ourselves very low and not giving ourselves the credit and the value that we deserve. So this is about changing that. But for some people, engaging and reframing these unhelpful thoughts might sound very time consuming. It might not work. It might feel a bit artificial. So even though the evidence is there to say that it works, it's not always for everyone that it works. And in those situations, some other techniques, for example, techniques from another framework called acceptance and commitment therapy, could be helpful. And it's interesting because many of you mentioned yoga and mindfulness, and you see that a lot of what underpins acceptance and commitment therapy is aligned with the principles of these contemplative practices. So first of all, it is about values. It is about saying, okay, so what is most important for me? If we go back to the example I gave about, okay, giving a presentation, that makes me very anxious. Cognitive behavioral professionals would say, so I need to change the way I think about the presentation. For an acceptance and commitment professional, the first thing would say, okay, so what are your values and how giving a presentation around well-being is aligned with your values? That is, if this is something important for me as a professional, as a person, then it's worth enduring the discomfort that it might come, because it is something very meaningful to me. So it goes back to that issue of meaning that we were discussing in the beginning. Being present, so focusing on the here and now. So rather than thinking too much about my thoughts, just bringing the attention gently, in a non-judgmental, in an accepting way to the present, which has a lot to do with meditation. Acceptance, so be willing to experience uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and understanding they are part of life. Observing our thoughts rather than being ruled by them. So this idea of just being present in the moment, observing our thoughts and understanding that whatever is coming in my mind doesn't define me. I'm not the content of my thoughts. I can be an observer of my thoughts because our minds are designed to be on a constant stream, a constant flow of thoughts. Some of them will be very aligned with my values, with how I would like to see myself and everything. Others won't. Others will be just some thoughts related to my current mental state. If I am stressed, it might be a bit of more of a negative type of thoughts and everything. So developing this skill, this ability of actually not engaging with the thoughts, but just observing them, is extremely calming and also related with higher levels of well-being. So if the other technique doesn't work for you, you could give it a go to this one. Right. Now we are going to talk a little bit about acknowledging our emotions. Well, we've been saying that in moments of crisis like the one we are living now, it is very common that we experience a range of uncomfortable emotions, as we discussed before. So it's very important that we recognize them, that we don't belittle them, that we don't ignore them, because these emotions will find a way to surface again. So just pretending they are not there is not going to bring you a lot of comfort. And give yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. It's been frustrating and stressful to everyone. If we are not dealing with people in our families and our friends and our community in terms of health, if we are lucky enough not to have people getting ill around us, we still need to deal with the frustration of the uncertainty. Many of us are having to deal with unemployment or the fear of redundancy and the next days to come and all of that. So give permission to yourself to feel whatever you're feeling. And it's also important not to label things as positive or negative. Many times people think that positive psychology is about feeling positive and thinking positively, and that is not the case. Emotions that are normally labeled as negative are very important as well, and they can give us a sense of perspective. So feeling uncomfortable can drive us to do things differently, to try different things, and that can be extremely beneficial for us. Again, as we were discussing, practice being an observer of your feelings, of your thoughts, and that in a very gentle, accepting, and non-judgmental way, as you would do with a friend, as you would do with your child if you're a parent. Exercise that befriending with yourself as well. And also be patient and remember that you're not alone. We're all on the same boat, and everybody is having to deal with a great amount of anxiety and uncertainty. And I think the idea is that we come together as a community, that we exchange things that are working, that we inspire each other. And I think you may be seeing in the news and social media a whole range of very inspirational things that we could do, even though in lockdown or within the social distancing. So the point I want to make is that being within a social distancing scenario doesn't mean that we should feel lonely. Right, so that is a lot around thoughts and a mindful way of being, an awareness of thoughts and everything. Now we're going to talk a little bit about solution-focused skills. Okay, so what else can we do? There are there can be many steps to developing well-being, but the techniques that I thought would be useful for us to discuss today could be depicted into 6 steps. So our strengths, our values, understanding what gives us meaning, setting up goals, devising action plans, and experimenting, learning from setbacks, and celebrating our achievements. So these are the things that we're going to be discussing now. So starting with strengths. What is a strength? Strengths can be defined as positive traits. So they are like personality traits, so things that are very stable in the way we think, we feel, and we behave. They need to be present in different situations, and they need to contribute to the fulfilling of a meaningful life for yourself. So this idea that, this is a characteristic that you have that contributes to a greater good that you've established to yourself as being part of your mission in life. These are just some examples. Sorry, there has been some problem with the formatting. I think it's from Mac to PC and stuff. I apologize for that. But this is just the key message here is to give you some examples of strengths. as identified by two very prominent positive psychology researchers, Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman. So these strengths could be categorized in these domains of wisdom and knowledge, courage, love, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So all of us will have these strengths, and will have some of them being our top strengths, those that really characterize us. It is what we call the signature strengths. And it's very important that we identify them and that we use them as much as we can in our everyday life. But why? Well, some research has shown that by following our strengths, we gain insight and perspective into our lives. And it's been associated, using strengths has been associated with increased optimism, confidence, and vitality. It is good for our health. So doing more, exercising more of our strengths has been associated with less allergies, diabetes, chronic pain, and some mental disorders, some mental health issues, and also strengths help build psychological resilience. So this idea that we can overcome adversity and grow from them, rather than being knocked down by the negative events in life. So I don't think we'll have time to do the exercise, but one thing I really would like to invite you to do, and if you could write that down as a note for yourself for after the presentation. What do you believe are your top 3 signature strengths? And if you would like to do a proper identification of your strengths, you can go to www.authentichappiness.org, where you can use the strengths inventory for free. And then I would like to invite you to choose a situation this week where you could use one of your top strengths differently from how you normally use it. And then I would like you to once you do that, that you become aware, that you reflect on what was the outcome. And I think that would be a very interesting exercise for you to try in your path towards an enhanced sense of well-being. The other thing is understanding our values. And by values, I mean things that are most important for you in life. And we know that goals and activities that are aligned to our values have been increased with more satisfaction, with more sustained efforts for the goal to be achieved, and to higher levels of well-being. So it's very important that before we set up goals for ourselves, that we identify our values, because they need to be aligned. If our main objective here is to improve our well-being, then understanding what's most important for us in life and setting up goals that are aligned with this is really paramount. This is a list of some values and needs. So just for you to know what I mean by value. So things that are most important for you could be growth, could be participation, so being part of something that you find extremely meaningful, having autonomy, doing something at an excellent standard, and everything. So as well, after the presentation, go back to this list and have a look at it and try to identify among the list or not, or other things that you may consider and which is not on the list. What are the things that are most important for you? What are the things that should inform your goals? The other thing before we set up goals is to understand what gives us meaning. And there is this classical activity in positive psychology called the 3-question process. And that is about 3 relatively easy but extremely powerful questions that you should pose to yourself. One is, what gives you meaning? The other is, what gives you pleasure? And the other is, what engages you? So what are those activities where you feel time stops? Time flew by, and then all of a sudden it's the evening, and you are still doing it because you were so engaged. And then you can see where I'm taking you towards. Once you have the answers to those questions, try to explore what are the things that you do that give you meaning, pleasure, and engage you. And then what other activities that you're not doing, but that you could do, that could give you these three aspects. And then, of course, the literature will show us that the more we do of activities that join these three characteristics, the more likely we'll be to experience well-being. So I really would like you to invite you to give it a go after the presentation. Then it takes us to setting up goals, and I promise I'm almost in the end of the presentation. And then now that we know our values and our meaning, it's time to reflect on our life goals. So what do we want broadly? What is the vision that we have for our lives? And then once you have that, try to break that vision, that image that you have of your preferred future. So what are the things within my control that I could choose to build this life that I would like to? Once you break that down into smaller chunks, so onto the things that you believe that uh, by accomplishing would move you towards this preferred future, try to set up very specific goals. And these goals need to be, many of you, I'm sure, many of you are familiar with the concept of SMART goals, but just to refresh our minds. SMART goals is an acronym to depict the characteristics of goals that are more likely to be achieved. So, what characteristics are those? Well, goals that are specific, because if you have something that is quite vague, then you won't know what to do in order to achieve these goals. They need to be measurable, so you need to know how you're going to monitor your progress. They need to be something you want to do, so they need to be attractive. They need to be realistic, so setting up to yourself something that, for example, I mentioned I've been in love with painting and art in general, but of course it would be very unrealistic to set up to myself that I would like to become a professional painter and have an exhibition in an art gallery or anything like that. Of course, it could happen, who knows, in the future, but it would be quite unrealistic to set that up now that I'm just doing once a week just for fun, just for my own well-being and for my own pleasure. And they need to be time framed. You need to give yourself some sort of deadline. And then once you have that, the next step is to have some action plans. And I'm giving you this example from the Center for Coaching in London because it's an action plan that I believe draws on everything that we've discussed. And I think it would be very useful for you in this attempt to improve your well being. So choose a goal, remind yourself of the reasons to choose this goal, remind yourselves of the strengths that you have that you are going to use, that you're going to deploy to achieve this goal. Set up some first steps and some dates for that. And also, very importantly, and sometimes we forget about it, try to anticipate some obstacles. So, what could go wrong actually? So, you see, positive psychology and the solution focused approach is not about thinking positively, it is about being rational and being realistic and measured. So, okay, I want to improve my well being, but life is more of a zigzag than a straight line. So, what would be the obstacles and what solutions could I have? What are my personal, my social resources that I could deploy to overcome these obstacles so that I can achieve what I want to achieve and start experimenting a life that is more aligned with my values and with the meaning that I want to give to my own existence? Finally, and this is the final step, it is about learning from setbacks and celebrating our achievements. Another thing that we often forget, we're very good at letting We're very good at putting ourselves down, but we're not very good at celebrating when things go right. And this celebration can also have a very positive effect in us wanting to achieve other goals in the future. So this diagram here, and it's the last one, really shows this summarizes this pathway. So setting up a goal, then developing an action plan, then putting it in practice. That's what good solution focused frameworks will tell us. Then we're going to become aware, have a reflective life, looking and saying, well, did this work? If it worked, then great, I can celebrate my success. If it didn't work, what went wrong and what could I change? However, not everything from any situation will not have worked. Some aspects will work quite well. So again, becoming aware of our own existence and of our own actions and all of that, and saying from this situation what worked so that I could do more of it and just change what didn't work. So yes, I just as a final word, just wanted to encourage you into embracing your self-learning journey and seeing it as a very exciting place to be. It has lots of challenges, lots of setbacks. Not everything is going to go right, but it is about developing this this sense of excitement about the challenge itself, about understanding us within a learning journey where we can learn and grow from our own mistakes, and we can encourage each other and we can support each other and our communities into flourishing that could make our journey towards well-being such a unique one, such an exciting one. Some further practical tips and hints, some of it we've been discussed already, could be doing mindfulness meditation, doing gratitude exercises, so writing letters and messages of gratitude to people that you feel you're very grateful for in life, and maybe you didn't have the chance to say thank you. That really mattered to me. And we know that there is a boost in well-being for both who is sending the message and the person who is receiving the message. Random acts of kindness. So what could be done in your community? Of course, with safety, considering the health issues. But what could be done to demonstrate kindness to people around you? Following a routine, because staying at home can feel very unstructured and not very good to our goals. So what can we do to establish a routine? Find a hobby. We've discussed in the beginning, learning a new skill, doing painting and all of that. Appreciation of arts and beauty. So that connects a bit with contact with nature, but also we know, oh, Gisele, come on, we can't go to museums, we can't go to many places now. But the good news is that you can do a lot virtually. There are many art galleries and museums that you can type on Google, and there will be a virtual visits to different interesting places in the world. And it might be that will also want to establish a goal of visiting those places in the future and all of that. The final one would be contact with nature, which again could feel that we can't really go out and do holidays or go to many parks at the moment, but you can always do some gardening at home. You can always try to connect with nature somehow. And the good news is that the literature is also supportive of contact with nature as an important factor towards well-being. So based on all this, what will you do? So I've given you a range of possibilities, all of evidence-based techniques. So which one of them do you think you would like to give a go? And this is just a summary. I'm not going to extend too much on it because I know we are getting tight in time, but I think the one I would really like to stress is the last one on what could be some creative ways that you could use to help you boost your well-being and that of those around you. Just having that question there, just trying to think creatively from all that we've discussed, from all that you've been doing already, what could be done to boost your well-being and that of your community as well. And then finally, just wanted to let you know that in October this year, we're going to have the 10th International Congress of Coaching Psychology, which is an area in psychology that draws a lot on all that we've discussed. It is around positive psychology, it is around solution-focused approaches and other approaches to increase people's well-being and self-development, and that's going to be a virtual meeting streamed via Zoom. So, you will be able to access the Congress and attend the Congress from any part in the world. So, yes, if you're interested in getting to know more, if you have something you would like to present, if that's part of your study as well, it might be a very good opportunity to be part of this community during these 3 days in October. And I think that's all from me. And I'll be very happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Giseli. That was a very insightful discussion and a sharing that you've provided us today. I think many of our viewers today would have benefited from that. But I would like to recap a little bit from what you said, because I think in the time of COVID-19, it's very useful. It's very useful and it's very necessary to be reminded that psychological health is very, very, very important. And I think that's one of the most universal thing that is connecting us all, because even if it's in the UK or if it's in Malaysia or anywhere else in the world, psychological health speaks one language, that it's the well-being of it. So some of the things I would like to recap from your session today is that just remember, everyone, that it's very normal to feel many, many different emotions, especially when you're in a critical situation, in a crisis situation. So it's very normal to feel overwhelmed and confused, and sometimes you don't even know what you're feeling. So it's very normal to feel that way. Yeah, so just remember that. Acknowledge your feelings, your thoughts, and all of those different things that's coming your way. Give yourself that time to reflect, which is very, very important. And of course, as what Dr. Giseli said, you have to assess and observe the situation, and also what are the thoughts and the emotions that's coming to you at that point of time. So give yourself that space. So with that space, you're able to reflect and find your strengths, or reach out to anyone that you need to reach out at that point of time. And this tells us to also not isolate. So when you know that you need to reach out, you definitely need to reach out. So for those of you who are in Malaysia, I would like to remind that if you do feel, when you've tried everything, when you've reached out and you still feel overwhelmed and I still need extra support, so I would definitely encourage you to seek professional support. So for Malaysians, I would like to remind you that we have hotlines by Befrienders, a couple of NGOs by Befrienders and MMHA. You can check out their Facebook so that you get to know when they're operating, their hotline numbers, and they're also doing Skype sessions at this point of time. So yeah, so try to reach out if you really need to. So right now is the session for Q&A. So just type your questions in the comment box, and we'll pick out a few questions for Dr. Giseli to answer. So we'll just look into some of the questions. Okay, so we have our first question from Justin Liu. So he's asking, do you think online interactions would foster equally meaningful relationships when we have always said that face-to-face interactions are more meaningful? Dr. Giseli, would you like to answer this?
Yes, very much for the question. And Justin, it is a very important question, very clever question. Thank you for posting that. And I think the answer for that, in terms of an evidence-based answer for that is going to come after all this is gone, with the new research that is ongoing in the field of mental health, psychology, and psychiatry on people's reactions to the current crisis. What I would say to you, but I want to make it very clear that it is my opinion as a person, and not research data, is that the online interactions, if they have the purpose of being constructive, so it is not about trolling, it's not about cyberbullying and all of that. So if the online interaction is about us having conversations with our family via I don't know, the different online platforms and the telephone and all of that, rather than face to face, I would say it is better than not having it at all. My feeling is that I don't think face to face interactions is replaceable for online interactions. I think there are pros and cons in all of them. For example, professionally, when you have now online teaching, some students are finding it better. They find it is, for if you are more introverted, you feel more comfortable having the class being delivered safely in your house. You feel more confident about making a question because sometimes you can just type it, and you don't necessarily need to feel very exposed to a larger group, for example. Other people will really miss that routine of going to the campus, and they will take their sense of belonging from that scenario, from that setting. So I would say, for me, for example, my family is in Brazil. I'm in the UK. My family is in Brazil. It's been, I don't know, well, 5-6 months we don't see each other, and that's because I was very lucky to be able to go there in December, before all this. So of course it is hard to deal with the distance and with the uncertainty of when we are going to see each other next face to face. So I believe face to face is better, but compared with not having any sort of resource at all to have that interaction, then online is doing a lot for all of us, I think, in terms of our well-being.
Okay, so if there are any more questions, we will take a couple more questions. Mr. Roslan has asked, I haven't met my family for almost 9 weeks. Every time I VC my kids, they will cry. It was an emotional moment for us. How should I react? What is your advice to make them not cry when we VC? Dr. Giselle?
Yes, Teva, thank you very much. Thank you to you and to Rosalind for such a very, such an important question. And I'm really sorry to hear you've been through all that. And well, I think, drawing from what we've discussed today, I think the first thing is to acknowledge the emotions and just feel, yes, we love each other, so we miss each other. So of course we feel sad and we feel frustrated for not being able to see each other, and that is okay to feel like that. That is a sign of love, of a positive emotion, rather than something that is destructive. So the emotion in itself is not anything negative or anything that we should worry about. It's part of our normal experience. The care we need to have with ourselves and our children is to not have that become an overwhelming experience, and so I think it has a lot to do with teaching ourselves and teaching them to see things within perspective. Yes, so we are not able to see each other now. It's been a long time. We miss each other, but there will be a day we will reunite, and that is going to be glorious, and that is going to be a very special moment for all of us. So what could we do now to prepare ourselves for that moment? Or trying to see all this as something transient, something that is going to come to an end, rather than it's going to be forever like this. We're not going to see each other again. We're not going to have face-to-face interactions again. So I think reframing those thoughts, so going back to what we were discussing and thinking perhaps what is brewing inside our minds and our children, of course, because they if it's uncertain for us, let alone for them, they have much less understanding of all that's going on. They can't follow the news and everything. But it is about identifying these thoughts and seeing where it feels that I can't stand it anymore, it's going to last forever. These we call it hot automatic thoughts. So these thoughts really hold the power to trigger negative emotions. So how could we reframe them? How could we bring some perspective to them and seeing this as transient? And what could we do so that when the time comes for us to meet up again, it's going to be great? How can we prepare ourselves to something good? I would say these are the things that I would try and do. And of course, all that I've said today, the meditation exercises and the hobbies, the finding, painting, developing new skills, this is also for children. It's applicable for children as well. Gratitude exercises, thinking about our best possible self, so writing ourselves a letter from the future of how we could see each other and how we have a letter from the future, from us after the crisis, looking at ourselves and the things that we've done now that helped us overcome this crisis. So all these are exercises that you could propose to your children to do with you in preparation for for resilience and well-being and getting ready for hopefully a happier life in the months to come.
All right, I think we have time for just one more question, although I see a few questions coming in, but I think we only have time for one more. So maybe we can just have our last question. Let's see. Okay, by George Chinadu. Do you think it would be useful for universities to set up post-COVID-19 psychology advisors to assist students going through some emotional issues? Dr. Giselle?
Yes, George, absolutely. You're on the ball, as we would say. Yes, I think even before COVID-19, unfortunately, very sadly, we know from research that the student population, university students, experience poorer mental health in comparison with the general population and higher levels of loneliness. So even before the crisis, the student population was already seen as a vulnerable population to whom student well-being programs should be in place. And I believe that now, after COVID-19, this will become even more of an issue. So for sure, and I can say that at Greenwich and my collaborators at King's College London and myself, and I'm sure in other universities as well, we've been considering a lot of, we've been putting together post-COVID-19 student well-being programs and resources to be able to support our students into transitioning to a life post-COVID-19 and dealing with our emotions and all the side effects of everything that's going on in the in a way that is constructive to everyone. So for sure, I agree with you. I think it should be a topic very high in the higher education agenda.
Okay, I think that's the time we have today for questions. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of all our participants. Thank you, Dr. Giselle, so much for your time and your sharing today. She gave us a lot of great tips for us to do at this point in time, and also basically prepare us in times of COVID-19 situation or any other kinds of challenging situations. The best way for us to take care of ourselves is to take care of our mental health. So we have other webinars as such coming up as well. So we have an upcoming webinar titled Early Childhood Care and Education Insights. So anyone who's interested in this webinar, you can go to the screenshot, you can screenshot the QR code, or you can go to the link and register yourself there. There will also be a description there'll also be a link in the description box below. So you can also go to the link there. Okay, so you can join our Telegram group for more free webinars and updates. So this is a QR code and the link as well. So you want to join in with SEGI's future webinars, please do, because we have a lot of webinars coming up. We have prepared a lot of insightful programs for all the viewers and participants. So yeah, please do sign up. Okay, so I'm going to show you the slide for the certificate. So if you would like to get a certificate for today's session, please go to this QR code or the link, the bit.ly link that we have shown to you. So it's expiring in 30 minutes. So please do go and register yourselves there so you can get your certificates as well. And same in the description box below where you can get the link to the certificate. This is also for all my colleagues in SEGI. You can also go to the same link for your certificate. Okay, I hope that was enough time for you to screenshot this screen at least. Right, so thank you very much for coming on to the session today. On behalf of SEGI Group of Colleges, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the SEGI Evening School webinar series. And stay connected and see you next time. Thank you very much. Take care.